Your landings suck. They suck, they're never good, they're always horrible, and you must improve them now. You always ignore the touchdown zone. The touchdown zone is the area that the airport has specifically told you that you must land there. Not before, not after, not halfway in the runway, there. If you constantly miss the touchdown zone, you're risking losing half of the runway, and if you do, you end up crashing with another aircraft, or if you're lucky, you end up in the grass. Or if you're actually really, really lucky, you stop before the runway ends. That is why, please don't ignore the touchdown zone. You must land there, and it is the safest area that the airport has specifically told you, as I said, that you must land there to prevent any sort of accidents. If it's not that problem, then you're always thinking smooth equals good. This is a trap, guys. If you think smooth equals good, how many times have you overflared the aircraft before landing and touched down thousands of feet from where you're supposed to, thousands of feet after the touchdown zone? Seriously, this is a crisis that comes from the barter landing trend. And most of the landings from the Swiss 001 barter landing playlist, they are very, very late from the touchdown zone. They are mostly even farther from halfway from the runway, and maybe even crashing, but they just cut it just to, make it as satisfying as possible. So yeah, don't over concentrate on the smooth landing, but obviously don't hit the aircraft and destroying your landing gear. That's not what I want here. What I want is that if you overcare, as we say, if you overcare of how smooth your landing is, well, you're probably gonna miss if you're on the centerline, or if you're at the right airspeed, for example, or if you're actually not missing the checklists, or especially if you're not missing the touchdown zone, you're probably missing a lot of other stuff, and a smooth landing, to be honest, isn't really the safest one. In fact, you can make a hard landing and it could still be considered safe. Well, that is not the problem. Then how is your center line? Good, bad, great? Well, it's definitely horrible. You're always close to a wing strike that other aircraft that happen to be next to you, while you're thinking that, oh, I'm just never gonna hit someone. What are the chances? Well, first of all, you just proposed that a bad landing is okay, and it's okay to vomit all of the passengers. And secondly, you just proposed that aviation safety is stupid, and nothing like that has ever happened in the history of the world, which it has. But you just ignored that. So anyways, this is a trap, and you should always be on the center line at all costs. Nose to center, period. Okay, so now we understand that your landings suck. But how can we improve them? How can we actually make the best landings possible? On touchdown zone, on center line, and therefore smooth? Well, you definitely need a long-term advice. If you only focus on this video, it's not gonna be enough, because the advices I'm gonna give are pretty straightforward and they're short-term. So if you focus on the rest of this channel, I have some big plans improving those landings once and for all. And you will definitely succeed at a barter landing in any flight. And to accomplish that, you must subscribe and hit the notifications to not miss those plans. Because if you actually don't subscribe, you will miss a lot of tips and tricks, or even stuff that you might have actually needed to improve those landings. So it's up to you if you want to improve them or not. It's up to you. So now onto the short-term advice now. One way to remove those horrible landings is to focus more onto the airspeed. This is so overlooked, and what you have to do is put your eye more often than you are onto the airspeed indicator. I beg you. This is so overlooked, and the airspeed is probably one of the only reasons why the aircraft flies. It's the only reason why you're in the airspeed. So don't be below the assigned airspeed that you're supposed to fly before touchdown, or even above. And that airspeed is called VREF, and it's something that we're gonna talk about a little after it is because it mostly depends on which aircraft you're flying and what circumstances you are, such as wind or the runway, the terrain. I mean, yeah, the weather, yeah, and lots of other stuff that is not gonna be that important in this video. Go too fast, you're gonna have to bleed off all that airspeed before touchdown, or in the worst circumstances, you're gonna bounce off the runway and gonna have to make a second touchdown, which is really, really uncomfortable, especially from plane spotting. But what's a guarantee is that you're gonna have to use a lot more runway, and that is a lot more risky. So don't be too fast, and also don't be too slow because there's a higher likelihood of stalling, which we already talked about in the video. Check it out up here, and or in the description. And in the worst circumstances, you might even tail strike due to the high angle of attack you already have. If you're good at airspeed, then you must think about what you got wrong in the past flights that were actually horrible. In other words, the touchdown zone, the centerline, and the smoothness. So how are you gonna correct those landings if they're actually at the last seconds of every single flight? How is it gonna be that efficient to correct each of them? Well, there are actually many ways, and I'm just gonna talk about two of them since this is short term, remember? And the last one being really, really important. The first way is simple. Just go into your flight simulator if you have one, spawn an approach towards the best suited runway for the airport with no wind, clear skies, and the time being around noon. And the weather options, you start flying the approach like normal. The aircraft is fully configured, and you land like normal. Like you just come from I don't know, a 7 hour flight, and you want to make it as best as you can. So you land the aircraft and then you stop. You don't have to exit to the taxiway. You just stop, and then you repeat that process using the reset button, and you do that again and over and over and over again. This is a really efficient way to learn from your mistakes and your techniques for a landing instead of starting from cold and dark and making a flight from a random airport to a random airport at a random time. You take off, you cruise, and then you land and you realize that it was horrible. So don't do that. It is really inefficient, and you must choose the efficient path by starting off directly towards the approach and learning as fast as you can. Just one disclaimer. If it's not possible to actually spawn on a flight approaching the runway directly in your simulator, just start off from the runway. You just take off, you do a traffic pattern, and you configure yourself, and then you can actually land. You just reset using the reset button, obviously, in your simulator, and you're good to take off again and again and again using and obviously landing in order to improve your landings. This is much more efficient, as I said, and and my guess is that it's way better because you actually know how to not only make the best landing but also know when to configure yourself, because when you actually spawn directly towards the runway on approach, it's already configured and it's much slower, and you're not really used to the normal procedures of an airline. So yeah, I would really recommend using starting off from takeoff directly. The second way, and this is really important, don't underestimate the approach. Seriously, if your approach is bad, there needs to be a miracle for your landing to actually be good. But you're still gonna feel bad because your approach was bad, so you're screwed anyways. On the other hand, if you time your checklists well, especially if you make sure you configure yourself at an early time if you're struggling or you're a beginner, as well as aligning yourself at the runway and aiming towards the touchdown zone, your landing will be much, much better. There's a higher chance there needs to be some sort of, the worst case scenario for your aircraft to make a bad landing if your approach was good. But in 95% of the cases, if your approach is good, your landing is gonna be good. So you don't have to worry anyways. So just make sure your approach is well executed and your landing is almost guaranteed that it will be better. It was just a short-term advice. Not for the long term, hit the subscribe button and the bell to not miss anything that is holding you back from improving your landings in the future, which is why it's called long term. Just go below and click the button, and with all that said and done, we'll see you on the next video. Happy flying.